Josh and Matt, minus Matt, here with the best part of your week. This is Wireless Chat, and we are very, very honored to have our special guest, Neil Young, today, joining us from wherever Neil joins us from. And I am super excited about this conversation with Neil. Neil and I go way back. We've been working together for a very long time. I actually feel very fortunate to call him one of my closest friends. So I'm excited, Neil. I'm excited to talk to you today. We got a lot going on. So, we talked a little bit about, Vista last time, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But before we do, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now with Marsico, and how did you get into Vista?
Well, Josh, good for me to be here today as well. I'm gonna go. We'll see how the week pans out, but
Right.
still some time. But no, it's good. I started with Marsico in November of '99. So where I'm at, I'm actually coming to you from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I'm still in the same spot I was all those years ago. I was fortunate. I think now I have the distinction of being Marsico's first outside salesperson. And back in the day when we did prepaid phone cards, transitioned, from with the phone cards into the first red boxes that we had, which of course is the basis of the Marsico the iconic Marsico symbol. Was there in the beginning of Boost when Dave brought and Jamal partnered up and brought Boost on board. And then in about 2013, became business development manager for a little unknown at that time prepaid opportunity called Xfinity Prepaid for internet and television. And we started off then with the initial test markets of Detroit. And then a year later went into Memphis and expanded, kind of did our beta testing down there until Boost decided to bring it on full time in the Boost stores. Then late 2017, this Vista concept came up. I know you had Steve on a couple weeks back and we're talking about it. And I know you and Steve were kind of right in the very beginning with that opportunity that Boost said, here, we're going to do something different. Presented all the DDPs, and I know Marsico ran with it. And I think in 2017, Steve and Kim Lowry and myself sat down and kind of figured out what the Vista program was going to be, Vista PCS at that time. And in the nutshell, as Steve talked about, it just gave operators an opportunity based on their needs to kind of come into a large organization, get more assistance, and different benefits. But the one requirement, and this is the key to this, why this is all relevant, is that Boost required the DDP to be the tenant, actually sign as the tenant on the lease. So in the past, it's one thing to have a bunch of distributors have their own leases, but now you're actually signing. Now, Jamal had been doing it forever. I think the last podcast, they said like 250. Jamal's kind of corrected it to say probably more like 2,500, he said, that he's been involved in leasing over his years, and that's accurate. When we started doing our own leases, and then you suddenly get really familiar with why are leases different and how do you get better leases and why do the terms vary so widely. And working with Jamal, we kind of we had to, for our own necessity, be able to make it work for that aspect for us, for the tenants, for that program to work. So
yeah, absolutely. Steve had mentioned Vista Lease obviously in our last interview. Why don't you just give us a quick recap of
Sure.
what all the things Vista does, and especially in the lease service side?
Well, when we started working with Vista PCS, and one of the things when we pitched it, to probably hundreds of different operators, not everybody took it. It wasn't for them for one reason or the other. But even with them not maybe being interested in coming to Vista, a lot of them were very interested with the idea of the lease negotiating, because that's something they had run up against, and they realized that we had a kind of a built out, we call real estate back office, again, out of necessity, and that we could offer, and through that program, something they didn't have themselves. But at that time, we just weren't ready to, go beyond Vista PCS. We're 5 years into it now, and we realized, again, because we see hundreds of leases, not just new leases that we negotiate, but assignments that people bring to us. So it's one thing to get a lease from a landlord that is bad to start with, but when you realize you're getting an assignment, this is a lease someone actually signed, and you're going, wow, how did that happen? So our experience, our data points really started to pile up, and we realized that we had a way of processing these leases from start to finish, whether it was a new lease or an assignment or negotiating, midterm, that we had, we knew what was what, and that we could take this and turn into something different. So we developed Vista Retail Lease Services to address the needs for the small independent business person.
Okay. It's interesting. Wouldn't the real estate agent though be the one that would protect the tenant? Isn't that kind of what they do?
Okay, so you think, right? And that was naive, Neil, in the beginning. And I'm working with Jamal. I used to meet with Jamal every week, sometimes twice a week, and meeting with Vista's lawyer. And of course, we have the real estate agents, which I love because aren't they doing my job? And you realize a couple of things that end up happening, right? Real estate agents get paid. Not when the property goes, unless they're what they call the listing agent. The listing agent gets a piece of the action no matter what. But
Hmm.
everybody else who's when you go through a realtor, they don't get paid unless you sign that lease, right? And if you don't sign, if somebody else signs that lease, they don't get paid. That's just the bottom line. So they are working with you to the point that they need to get you across the finish line. And sometimes you'll hear a real estate agent talk about how many leases they've, been on. I've done this many leases. I said it's one thing to have shepherded X amount of leases through signing. It's another thing to actually negotiate the leases.
Yeah,
When we look at a lease, we look at every provision of that lease. We've identified, more than 40 points that we look at every lease. And some point, if they're not there, we get concerned, right? Hey, where is this point? Why isn't it in there?
yeah,
So our process is the process that allows us to scale and make sure that we're good. But the realtor, again, realtors are great at what they do, right? Finding you that property that fits your needs based on your demographics, based on your size, based on your price points. But after that, it's all about getting you to the finish line. Some of the best leases that we work with people on are leases that don't get signed because when
yeah,
we've got all said and done after our best efforts, our best advice to the tenant is this is a really bad lease. And
yeah.
sometimes no lease is better than a bad lease.
Absolutely. That's obviously that's obviously one of the bigger mistakes is, somebody, jumping in on a bad lease. But what are some of the like common mistakes like that happen when in the lease process and the lease signing process?
Well, the most common would be, I would think that people look at a lease and feel that the only terms that they can negotiate are the amount of the rent and maybe the length of the lease. That's
Yeah.
the thing. Because partly is because when they look at the lease, they, in many cases don't understand much of it. I mean, you can start reading, doesn't take you very long to get lost in the weeds, right? And there's legal terms in there, and I'm not going to say legal mumbo jumbo. I hate that term. Okay, but there is. I mean, like I said, there are still Latin words buried in those leases. The things they call boilerplate, which are intentionally dense, which are
Yeah.
designed, specifically designed. That's why the word boilerplate exists to discourage people from delving into them and digging deep. And we aren't intimidated by boilerplate. We aren't intimidated by legal, and this because we have a lawyer, and that's all she does is all she does mostly does is read leases. These are the
Yeah.
same attorney who does all the work for Marsico and for Jamal and Dave reads our leases for Vista.
Oh,
So
that's
we know it when
fantastic.
it gets done. So it definitely works out. So
Absolutely.
don't think you can't you can't read the lease. Don't not read the lease, and if you don't understand it, make sure somebody who does understand it reads it for you, so you understand what's in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we've always done wireless retail. Um, is there potential for us to help in other industries as well?
Well, and that's really again what Vista Retail Lease Services is looking to. And right again, we say retail, wireless is what we know right now. There's a lot of similarities. Even if you were anything having to do with prepaid, but we've done help people, restaurants, different areas like that. But
Yeah.
so we can do about anything on it. But there are some areas that you have to have additional expertise. The interesting thing I think is that maybe people understand is that most of in the term of the wireless world, Booth especially, is that most of your larger like your 20, 30 plus doors, they have a real estate department. They may
Yeah.
not be as deep as Vistas is, right? But they're going to have 1 to 5 people whose job is to read leases, manage leases, negotiate leases to make sure, and have an understanding because they have to if they're going to be that big because they can't afford to sign bad leases either. So what we've done with Vista is basically taken something that was not necessarily readily attainable, and we've made it attainable to the 1 to 100, door dealer. I mean,
Yeah.
because we can even help people who've got their own real estate because we go deeper, right? But it's certainly available to anybody at a reasonable price.
Yeah, absolutely. Just speaking of retail in general, what's your opinion on the outlook of brick and mortar traditional retail spaces?
Well, it's not going away. We know that because we still see retail spaces being built. I mean, it's going to be regional. I mean, some regions may change depending on any other demographics and economics, but for the most part, we still, see, especially the small strip malls. You still need to be where your people are. People are still, more bike paths, more people walking.
Yeah.
Cars are expensive. That's one of the things that is truly happening, and people like to touch phones. We know that. I
Yeah.
mean, that there's a lot of the younger kids may still be very comfortable ordering online, but people like to go to their store build that relationship. And we see no let up right now in our business.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the post-pandemic showed us how much people really wanted to get back out into real world, and I think retail is a part of that.
Right, exactly.
So are landlords getting more savvy with their leases? Are they changing anything, or is there any
More
like
savvy.
yeah more
So
savvy?
more savvy. I think landlords, for the most part, have always been savvy, but we don't lump all landlords together. There are the mom and pops who are, they've got a 10-page lease and a handshake, and absolutely those
Mm,
people are out there. You got people who are, all the way to the huge corporations that run the malls. I mean,
yeah,
leasing in malls is a whole different deal, as a matter of fact. And people think you can't negotiate them. You can as well. But landlords have usually been pretty savvy. The leases are obviously going to be written in their favor. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you
yeah,
start with the most favorable terms possible coming at you? But I think that what we've really seen right now, the biggest change right now is longer terms in a lot of places. That
okay,
that when the economy was poor, they would three-year terms. Now they want 5-year terms. The other thing now is they're switching away from what's called a gross lease, where everything's included in the rent, one payment, to what they call triple net. So you've got your property tax, your building insurance, and your common area maintenance are all additional in addition to your base rent. And that allows the landlord then to adjust those terms every year based on what the actual expenses are. And that has
okay,
become a big deal now because of inflation.
yeah,
And, so the big thing on that is making sure you understand what your CAM charges are and what your actual liabilities, because if you suddenly move into that situation, you can get a very unpleasant surprise at the end of every year of what you're liable for, that you didn't think so before.
gotcha. You touched on a couple of the different things that Vista can help you with. What are some of the what's the full package that Vista offers in terms of lease management?
So we looked at Vista and we wanted to make it accessible to really people at every level, from somebody who's an absolute novice, maybe even where English is a second language, or somebody maybe just wants a part of it, right? So we have got people who are very experienced in negotiating. They want to do their own negotiations. We even encourage people to negotiate on their own if they've got an existing relationship with their landlord. I mean, you work
Uh,
with the friendship, right? So we start our packages off. Number one is just coaching, right? We do a coaching session where people can come in and they say, here's what I think I know, and we can go ahead and confirm, deny, modify,
yeah,
because we do have a lot of data points. We
yeah,
know what, industry standard is, but we also know what's possible. And we kind of have a pretty good idea what make landlords tick. Again, each landlord is different. We're going to talk to you about your landlord. We're going to help you
yeah,
kind of understand your landlord. The landlords are not just motivated by money. People think it's all dollars. There's a lot more that goes into landlord motivation than just that final dollar. So
uh,
we do with our coaching really help people to work through things. At that point, the other thing is we have which can be separate. Steve will call it a la carte. We have document review, and that is, let's say when landlord is presenting you with that lease to sign, and you say, "Wow, I don't either have the expertise or the time, or maybe the time, or I can't find the right person to do it. How am I going to know what's in this lease?" Our leases are reviewed by our attorney.
yeah,
She'll highlight them and then comments on those leases. I go over them with you. We look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the key about that is, all those leases pretty much start from the same spot. Unlike a residential lease where the legislature will kind of protect you a lot of times from the unequal bargaining power of the
yeah,
landlord. In commercial real estate, and you are considered to be on an equal level with that landlord, even though in reality you really aren't. So the idea of fair is gone in commercial leasing. You get the lease. You don't get the lease that's fair. You get the lease you negotiate,
yeah,
right? And the document review is a huge deal of that. When that landlord gives you that lease to look at, to be able to go through it all, understand actually what it means, what your obligations under that lease are, and then hey, these are parts that can be negotiated.
yeah,
And then at that point, a lot of times the people can go back and continue on with the landlord, or they may have us take over. That's something that happens a lot as well in dealing with the landlord. Now, the other thing that we do is the full negotiation from start to finish. Again, we're working hand in hand with a prospective tenant to know what they're looking for, what their ranges are. And then one of the things that we do that is probably the most unique and helpful is we do our own letter of intent. I mean, different
yeah,
people do letters of intent, but we have a unique one that we use. And our strategy is to get all the pain points out front, the big terms out front,
yeah,
because if we can't get those, then if you're not going to get them later on in the lease. You get them out in front. If the
right,
landlord wants to keep talking to you, guess what? You got the big ones out of the way.
yep,
But even after that letter of intent is reached and agreed upon the terms, and that's usually going to be your rent, length of terms, but also the things regarding HVAC liability, option periods, maybe even early termination provisions. even then that landlord's still going to hit you back with a 35 to 55-page lease. That's when it goes off to document review, same thing. That's all part of that process. And then even after that standpoint, we got to go back to the landlord and negotiate all those additional terms.
Yeah.
And some people think that stuff that's in the lease that can't change, or it's, people say, oh, it's no big deal. The real estate guy will say it's no big deal, or you can't do anything about it. Hey, if it's no big deal, why is it in there? Right?
Right.
Our view is if it's no big deal, let's get it out of there, or let's
Yeah.
make sure it makes sense, that it's clear. And then when the final lease is done, then we're reviewing it to make sure what you're signing is actually the lease you agreed upon. So there's a bit of a process there, but every lease is different because every landlord's different.
Okay.
Another thing that Vista does is we have portfolio management, whether you've got one lease or 50 leases. That way you don't miss any lease deadlines. We're also get you out in front of negotiating for either option periods or when your lease is about to expire, so that you aren't sitting there at the end at the mercy of the landlord because you said, oh, wow, I've got 3 months left to negotiate a new lease. That 3 months, that's not enough.
Right.
6 months minimum, and we usually try to get people thinking 9 to 12 months out ahead of time. And we have reasons for that, which we explain to people. It's a process, but if you want the best lease with where you're staying, you got to go through that process. Otherwise, you're just wishing that the landlord's going to be a nice guy to you. So, and then finally, one of the provision things that we do provide, actually, anytime you have a problem with the landlord, you think you're, getting abused, we'll be happy to talk to you and take a look at your lease and see if there's something that we can do for you. But the big one is really terminations. If you find that you have to, maybe some people say this is one of the big takeaways. If you ever find yourself in a situation of having to leave your lease early before the expiration, please reach out to us. I'll spend 15 minutes on the phone with you. I'll take a look at your lease just to see what's going on generally. But I'll tell you what, you want to negotiate with the landlord before you walk out, not after. Some people think that, well, I'll keep paying rent, so I won't be in default of my lease. The minute you walk out of your place and you go dark and you pull your gear out, in 98% of the leases, you're in default, even if you keep paying rent, if you never miss a rent payment. The minute you're in default, the landlord has all the power.
Yeah.
And your uncertainty can be huge, especially if there's something called the lease acceleration clause, which says all your rent is due and payable now. So if you've got 2 years left on your rent, on your lease, that's 24 months of rent that they want on the barrelhead. So the ability to talk to the landlord ahead of time is paramount before you go in default. So huge deal. If that's something that because hey, sometimes, bad things happen to good people, right? That's your situation. Let us know. We can help you.
You did talk about, ugly leases. Before we go, what is a horror story you want to share with us on a bad lease?
Well, one of them, and I guess this is, yeah, there are a lot. We kind of laugh at them. I should probably put together a collection, a little wax museum of horrible leases. That would be good. One that got me, it came to us as an assignment. So again, if you're buying a business, you're often taking an assignment and you're thinking about the business and the inventory, and you're thinking about your, residual, your monthly incentives, whatever, but you're not always thinking about that lease and how it plays in. And this particular person was paying cash money for a store, and they wanted to say, well, let's do this assignment. And I go, well, it's not like that we just have to take this, right?
Yeah.
So we looked at the assignment. One of the provisions from the assignment, the only time I've ever seen this, there was a provision giving the landlord the right to terminate that lease with 30 days notice. No other requirement at all. The landlord with 30 days could say, we're done, you're out of here. Wow. And so you're about to spend money to buy a business that has a lease that could be gone in 30 days. Well, suffice to say, we got rid of that provision as well as a number of other ones. And an assignment is a great time to clean up a lease. So don't think that you're stuck with the bad lease that you're bargaining for. And in fact, the other thing I'd say this, if you're buying a business, make sure you know what that lease says, because if you are stuck with that lease, a lot of people, they sign the buy-sell intent deed. Now they're stuck and they have to take that lease. Best time is to go ahead and get that person you're buying from, who knows the landlord likely, to get him on your side to help negotiate a better lease. We do it all the time. All right.
Great. All right, Neil. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time today. Love the conversation. This is just you're so full of information on this topic, and we really think that this is a huge value that we offer to our customers. So, thanks for stopping by from, Josh and Matt minus Matt. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below. We love doing these videos, and just come find out why it's better at Marsico. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.